Okay, so before I bring in Abel and Felipe, I first wanted to go over like what the SSRP is, the Social Science Reproduction Platform, what it does, and where things stand right now. If you're not familiar with the SSRP, it's a platform extended for crowdsourcing and cataloging attempts to assess and improve the computational reproducibility of published research. The SSRP is part of a larger project called the Accelerating Computational Reproducibility. And it, as the name of the project says, the goal is to improve the computational reproducibility of social science research. The platform is one tool to do that. So we crowdsource large-scale assessments and improvements of reproducibility, but then also the platform is a teaching tool in the sense that it helps build capacity among future researchers, social scientists, equipping them with the basic skills of how to do reproducible research through learning by doing. And one thing to highlight here is that the focus is on computational reproducibility. So essentially using the same data, same methods to reevaluate claims. However, that should not be confused with replicability, which typically involves different data, different methods in the process. So the platform itself serves three purposes. One of them is obviously to assess and improve. So we host a standardized survey which users fill out to record the results of their reproduction. We also host a moderated forum where users can share their work. They can also get feedback on their ongoing and completed reproductions. And then finally, since the way the data is entered is structured and standardized, we're able to produce measures of reproducibility. So on the platform, you go on Social Science Reproduction platform.org, there's what we call the Reproducibility Dashboard. And there are several instances in which the SSRP can be used. We think that the most typical use case would be in the classroom. So all those applied empirical research science courses where students work to replicate published work. So the platform can be used to facilitate that process. Beyond that, it can be used by researchers themselves who may be interested in evaluating their own work or other people's research. And then eventually we plan on releasing the data from the reproductions, and those could be used for meta-scientific research purposes. So there are several kind of like distinguishing features that make the SSRP slightly different from other related efforts. One is standardization, and you'll see this is going to be an ongoing theme with the remainder of my presentation here. But first, it's standardization in terms of the process and the definitions. So all reproductions typically follow this 5-step process. So reproducers are first guided through the process of selecting a paper, then identifying its research claims, so breaking down the paper and kind of like its basic elements, then rerunning everything, then potentially implementing any improvements, and then checking robustness. Paired with the platform, we provide this guide called the Guide for Accelerating Computational Reproducibility. Essentially, it's a protocol that provides guidance on each of these steps, but it also provides resources on how to communicate with the original authors, and then also provides resources for instructors who may be interested in using this platform as part of their courses. And all of these things are in the public domain. Another distinguishing feature of the SSRP is our nuanced approach to assessment. So SSRP analyzes specific research claims, so kind of like the highlight results, which are typically included in article abstracts. And then also the analysis is focusing on display items, so specific tables, figures that kind of like display the outcomes of research claims. And then any reproduction can focus on one or all claims found in the paper, and they can also reproduce all or any claim display items associated with a claim. And then finally, different display items can be reproducible at different levels. So essentially what we're trying to get at here is that we're trying to move away from binary judgments about papers, so declaring entire papers as reproducible or not, into a more nuanced assessment where we can say this paper is, for example, reproducible at level 5 out of 10 for such and such specification. And speaking of levels, we apply a 10-point scale, which accounts for the availability of data code and the ability to reproduce the results. So as you can see, this might be a little small, but if you visit the Acre guide, you can see like a bigger version. But the scale moves from level 1, which applies for display items where no reproduction materials are available, through level 5, where they're reproducible from the analysis data. So after the data have been cleaned and prepared to produce the final output, to kind of like the golden standard of reproducibility, which is the ability to reproduce everything from the raw data. And then one more item, which we're particularly proud of, and this is a new development on the platform. If you attended the annual meeting last year, this is like a brand new feature, is that the end product of every reproduction is a reproduction report, which is essentially a detailed and transparent account of the documents, the entire analysis. So here on the right, you can see kind of like the summary stats or summary information for one of the reproductions that were submitted recently. So you can see there's the paper that was reproduced, the number of claims, the name of the reproducer, the actual claims that were identified. There's also links to both the original reproduction package and then the revised, the one that the reproducer themselves actually worked on and developed. And reproduction reports are essentially scholarly artifacts in their own right. So they can be shared and cited. So each reproduction report is minted with a digital object identifier. They can be published under various privacy settings. So for example, in this case, this was fully public, but it can also be published anonymously. So for example, if a reproduction was conducted as part of a class, or if a reproducer for whatever reason wants to stay anonymous for a certain period of time, we allow up to 4 years. And then finally, the reproductions can be done collaboratively. This is a brand new feature that we're hoping to roll out pretty soon. All the reproductions are cataloged on the website, so they're publicly available, at least the ones that have been submitted so far. You can search them in this search bar, which is available from the homepage. And then they're also cataloged by papers. So as you can see, every paper can have multiple reproductions. And yeah, you can just do a blank search to see everything that has been submitted in the platform. So in terms of where things stand right now, as Ted said, we launched in August of 2021, and we're steadily growing the platform. So currently we stand at 208 registered users. The majority of them are instructors and both graduate and undergraduate students. And then also this community is pretty much global, and they're in 25 different countries. They've contributed 272 reproductions so far, 62 out of which have been completed, and there's hundreds of them which are still ongoing. This is work in progress. And on to the right here, we have where the reproducibility dashboard stands currently. As you can see, this is probably not representative of kind of like the computational reproducibility assessments that we've had so far. But this is, I guess, just an additional motivation that we need more data, and this is where you, the open science community, can step in. So if you're an instructor, please consider using the platform and contributing in that domain. So I guess before we move on, this is the team that was behind the platform. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at acre@berkeley.edu. So I guess without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Felipe Gonzalez, who is an assistant professor of economics at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. I hope I pronounced that right. And Abel Brodeur, who's an associate professor of economics at the University of Ottawa, and is also the founder of the Institute for Replication, an allied initiative that reproduces and replicates research findings in leading academic journals. So Abel and Felipe, I don't think I can see you. Maybe we could have them spotlighted, Iman.
Yeah, maybe if we start talking, gonna pop up at the very top.
Okay.
Yeah, hi everybody.
Hi Felipe, hi Abel. Thank you guys for joining.
Thanks to you.
I guess before we get started, maybe you could let us know, you could tell us a little bit more about the context in which you use the platform and what was your motivation to get started using the SSRP. Abel, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we recently launched, as you just said, the Institute for Replication. And basically the goal of the Institute is to try to generate as many reproductions and replications as possible. And basically this kind of the SSRP, the launch of the SSRP was perfect timing for us, because as soon as you're starting to talk about large-scale reproductions or large-scale replication efforts, you need to think about standardization, but you also need to think about guidelines. And especially because for many researchers, they didn't necessarily conduct replications before. And the first time you reproduce a paper, you replicate a paper, you need clear guidelines, and you also need instructions on how to report your results, basically. So the platform played really a key role for us because we didn't have to necessarily come up with our own platform. But it makes our life much easier, because as soon as somebody wants to replicate a paper, it's much easier to, first of all, to provide them information about the platform. But there's also the Acre guide, which is a companion to the platform. So maybe put the link in the chat. But this guideline is very useful and kind of guides potential reproducer or replicator into the steps for reproducing a paper. And it seems easy, but it's actually not that obvious how you should choose your claims, as you mentioned in your representation. So when you reproduce a paper, you need to familiarize yourself with obviously with the paper, but then which claims in a specific study are you going to be interested in reproducing or replicating? What are the different steps, identifying those, finding the data, etc. So for me, it was really this that attracted me to the platform initially, and over the past couple of months I've done myself 10 reproductions, and we have also a team at Institute for Replication that also reproduces paper using the platform. So I'm sure we're going to have the time to talk about many more advantages and what we've been doing, but I think that's kind of the introduction reason why we're so excited that you launched this platform.
Awesome. We appreciate you for participating. Felipe, do you want to also tell us a little bit about the context, about your context?
Yes, of course. So, well, I studied at my PhD at UC Berkeley, and I was actually TA and RA of Ted Miguel, and actually one of the I think it was the first time that you gave the transparency class back in, it has to have been 2014, 2013 or something. So we've been discussing all of this. I've been exposed to all of the ideas behind this transparency movement for a long time. I'm not an active researcher in that literature, but I've been following most of the papers that have been published and all the amazing work that BITS has been doing in the past decade. And well, I just had the opportunity to meet Fernando, who told me about what you were doing at BITS with this reproducibility platform, and then talk to Alex, talk to Ted, and it just sounded like it was the perfect setup, the class that I was teaching, to actually increase the number of works that we've been trying to reproduce and reproduce using the platform. So I was more than happy to incentivize students in basically a master's in economic graduate students who I teach the applied econometrics class in the master's, which is basically causal inference, just being exposing students to causal inference, and also reading lots of papers in economics and related social sciences. And it just seemed like a very good opportunity. And I always thought that students felt a little bit disconnected to the way that research is actually done and how it is published. So I think this was a tremendous opportunity for them to realize that research that we do in social science is not well, it's not rocket science, and it's basically just under the influence of so many decisions by researchers. And I think they really realize that there's a lot to be done to make sure that your results are informative, and there's definitely lots to gain when we are collaborating, all of us together, to try to make sure that what we are publishing and in economic journals or in social science journals is actually knowledge that is robust and that is there to stay for a long time. So it was a great opportunity. I think my students were extremely happy of participating in this experience and just using the platform extensively for a period of time.
Excellent, thank you so much. I guess I have a question specifically for Abel. What were the kind of like the benefits of the SSRP that you experienced in your use case? So I guess a large-scale reproducibility effort, such as the Institute for Replication.
Yeah, I think, you know, you're seeing increasing returns to scale. Let's say there's a small entry cost, you know, familiarizing yourself with the platform, registering, etc. But I don't think it's a big cost. So as you know, as soon as I was doing my first reproduction, even for me, someone who had done before replication or reproduction and had done meta-analysis, just made it easier to have the structure and you know, to go through a paper, identifying the key elements that I was interested in, the key claims, and then just being able to go in the platform, very easy friendly, enter the information, and then, you know, doing more and more papers, and also having other individuals be able to look at my own reproduction, building on it, potentially improving the reproduction or replication package of the original authors. And you know, one of the things that needs to be mentioned is some of the papers that we're trying to reproduce or replicate have already been reproduced and replicated. We're just not aware of it. So I think in general, you see a lot of time being wasted by researchers doing something that has already been done by someone else. I'll just give a quick example. So a few weeks ago, I was contacted by a senior microeconomist, a top researcher, mentioning that they were trying to reproduce a specific study, but they couldn't run the codes. And of course, our team at the Institute for Replication also wanted to reproduce that study. So it was very good information to know this, but they've actually contacted the original authors, trying to figure out bugs in the codes, trying to improve their README file, etc. But all this information was not shared. So I think the platform kind of allows researchers to put this information publicly. You can do it, as you mentioned, you know, publicly or being, you know, anonymous, but at least the information is out, and then I can use this improved reproduction package, replication package that's been put on the platform, and then improve it myself and just building on what has already been done. So I think we're just, you know, we're saving a lot of times. And as soon as you start talking about doing a large meta-analysis or you know, replication project, it's very important that the way you report the outcome is standardized. And this, you know, we've had tons of conversation at the Institute about, and also with people at BITS, with Fernando, with just trying to figure out, like, how do you report this and how can you compare across different reproduction and replications with different scales, but also just how many robustness checks have you done, and just being thorough and having something that is standardized. Because then it makes it much easier for other researchers to use our reproduction and replications and kind of doing their own meta-analysis and building on this. And it makes it much easier to compare or to put together a lot of these replications. So for us, in terms of giving incentives to people to reproduce or replicate papers, we give co-authorship to a meta paper that we're going to try to write, putting all together all these replications. It's much easier to put together all these replications when it's been done through the platform or through something that is standardized. I think it's, as soon as you're talking about something non-experimental using observational data, we don't have a lot of experience in replicating, but we also don't have a lot of experience in terms of just how should you report your replication? How should you write your paper, your replication report? And having a bit more of kind of standardization and using the platform just makes everything easier. So small entry cost, but I think huge increase in returns to scale. I've reproduced 10 papers so far, and using the platform now, it's super easy for me to reproduce another one, and it just streamlines the entire process and makes collaboration with a number of researchers much easier.
Thanks. So Abel talked about there is some cost of entry, so getting yourself familiarized with the platform and to get started. I was wondering if both of you could reflect on how can we make the platform even more accessible, I guess, and how can we recruit? What are the kind of like the features that you would like to see in the future that would be attractive to folks such as yourself, but then also, I guess, both of you are economists, but this is the social science reproduction platform. We're trying to expand it beyond just economics. If you had any thoughts on that. And maybe Felipe, you could go first.
Yes, of course. So we were discussing this informally the other day with Alex and Fernando. I think there are several spaces to make this easier to read. I was overwhelmed by the good experience that my students had, and they also had suggestions. And I realized that there are many things that are low-hanging fruit that can be done to improve understanding of the platform. So most of us, of course, we are in the academic world, so we understand how publications work. We understand when people talk about raw data sets, cleaning analyses, final data sets, DOIs, and a bunch of other terms that outside of academia is just, I mean, it's just a different language, I guess. So I think a very low-hanging fruit and easy thing to do to increase, to just decrease the fixed cost of actually understanding how the platform works and just making students more engaged is by just providing some structure or just giving them, for example, one page just describing, for example, the ecosystem of the publication, scientific journals in social science, just for them to understand that some journals require that you give the data and some do files or some analysis or some code, but others do not. So for them, all of this is very strange. So they don't understand that some journals don't even require you to provide the code, for example, and that nobody actually, many journals don't even they check that the code is actually makes sense. So just giving them a basic understanding of how the publication world works, I think would be very valuable. And in the same sense, just a small dictionary with different terms, I think would also be very, so students sometimes struggle to understand what is a claim and when a robustness check it's a claim, and when a claim can have different types of robustness checks or so that type of thing, I think, is low-hanging fruit that can be done kind of like on the outskirts of the platform, just to decrease the fixed cost of actually using it. And I think once you decrease that fixed cost, the students were extremely excited to use the platform because it provides some structure also to read papers. You know, when you think, when you're finding a claim in the paper, you wanna find the two biggest claims, for example, that makes you very focused in trying to understand what is the biggest claim that this paper is trying to do. And then where do you actually find the evidence for that claim? So I think the overall structure that the platform provides when reading a paper is extremely useful. And I think it can be used by more than just graduate students. Even if you are trying to contribute with your research to some literature, it has lots of value to just going through the analysis of some previous researcher. So I think those are the two main things. Overall, I think my students at least were extremely happy with the experience of using the platform. And they had a wonderful experience. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And this is very helpful feedback.
Yeah, adding on what Felipe was saying. I totally agree. These are low-hanging fruits, and there are things you should do. But I think one thing to highlight is without the platform, it's even much harder to actually identify claims and having an idea as a student of how should I even approach a paper. So I think, you guys are doing great. I agree with Felipe. There are small things that needs to be done, but I think, not a low-hanging fruit, but something that, as someone who has been working on p-hacking meta-analysis for 10 years now, one thing that struck me when I was using the platform is it's exactly the same way that I'm collecting test statistics in scientific papers. And it's exactly the same way that I'm doing meta-analysis project. And to me, I found it interesting that the platform is about reproduction. But actually, if I were to design a platform from scratch to do a meta-analysis to collect test statistics, it would be exactly the same platform. But I would just scrap all the questions related to reproduction and replication package. And I think you could even have like a button at the beginning, like which platforms do you want to use? Like, are you interested in a replication package or doing a meta-analysis? And if you have this, you can literally have people do all their meta-analysis and putting all the stuff that, people like Stanley, Ducoliagos and so on, like all the stuff they've done, you could put it in the platform and just having this huge space where all the different meta-analysis and social sciences that have been done are in there. And then you can see, for instance, okay, I'm adding a paper. I'm interested in either reproducing or just going to the paper to add to a new meta-analysis. And you could check a box saying, or look for a specific term. Okay, I'm interested in the effect of minimum wage on employment. And it brings you to all the other papers that are on this topic and just adding a paper to this meta-analysis. And the platform is designed like this. That's why I guess at the beginning, I really liked the platform because I've been doing this for 10 years. Literally the same steps that the platform is asking you to do. And just now you've added this thing that is related to the reproduction and replication package, which is fantastic. But I think you could also have this other kind of branch that is more not focused on the reproduction aspect, but just a meta-analysis. This is the way you would do actual meta-analysis. And I think for people who are starting in the field and don't have no clue how to do meta-analysis, which it seems easy, but the first time you do it, it's really, really hard. The platform is perfect. So it's not a low-hanging fruit, which require your web designer to do a lot of work, but
it's an exciting idea.
I think it would be very,